Okay, we're going to an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. I have a really cool watch for you from the brand Tudor. A little bit about them. They were founded by Hans Wilsdorf back in 1926 as an affordable alternative to the Rolex brand. And in terms of the type of watch, this is a dive watch. Some key common characteristics inside. When you're looking for a diver, of course, you're going to want water resistance, typically some type of screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible with a dive time bezel, and a dive extension is always nice if on bracelet, which this particular watch is really known for. This is the Tudor Pelagos left-hand drive, reference 2561 OT, and it's essentially a subtle update to their class leading professional diver. These go for $5,025 MSRP new, but you can get this particular pre-owned model for $3,250, which is a pretty nice deal from Belmont Watches. So big shout out to Belmont Watches for letting this piece in for a quick review. Now, with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, now, this has been a watch I've admired for a really long time, not just in the left-hand drive variant, but the Tudor Pelagos, even back in its more standard ETA 2824 variation days before they put in the manufacturer movement. I was a big fan of this. I really enjoy the look, the aesthetic, the theme. I just think it's beautifully executed, and of course, how can you not love this clasp, which is just extremely impressive. So let's just jump into some of the quick stats here. 41 millimeters actually in diameter and 42 at the bezel. So this is a little bit smaller than you would think, but of course, that thick diameter with 14.4 millimeters. Also, the fact that it is very much slab-sided is going to make this appear much larger and wear much thicker than it actually is, at least the visual weight. Now, in terms of the lug-to-lug, 49.8 millimeters lug-to-lug, so this is a pretty large piece, but it does have the female end link, so it's in terms of draping on a smaller wrist, you can see there, it can even drape smaller than its own lug-to-lug thanks to that actuation there and that range of motion from the female end link. So that can't be understated or underappreciated enough. This is fully made out of titanium. I believe I've read some places where they say the clasp is actually steel, and judging by the look, I tend to say I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. Which is funny, as much as everybody says, oh no, titanium gets scratched too easy. The most scratched place is steel, which is what really nobody complains about on a normal watch. And you can see that this model here does have a lot of wear and tear, which is nice because that means this was worn as a true tool watch, which I really like. And some of you are wondering, like, how can I have admired this watch so much and just never owned it? And I will say there's kind of, as I've spent time with it, I've realized kind of the reason why, and it's because I have two other watches that I feel like kind of fill a similar space. Now there's my U50, which, as much as I love the technology in this clasp, and I can see that it is definitely very lacking to that additional thought when I look at my Sinn. Also, my Sinn is in amazing condition because it's Tegimented steel. It's also quite a bit heavy by comparison, but it's also quite a bit thin by comparison, guys. And they both have 500 meters of water resistance. And of course, both have a very modern look. Although you can say that the Tudor definitely has some classically designed vibes that definitely feel a bit like a 70s throwback that has been modernized. So, that's where I feel like it kind of is a two-part supplement where I look at my deep diver that I wear quite often that's also quite thick, my Seiko SLA 039, except the SLA has those Seiko tricks to try to make the watch appear thinner. Look at the undercuts on that case. And honestly, this is has a lower water resistance at 300 meters versus 500, but hey, an ISO compliant saturation diver versus just a watch that is, I think, very useful and professional quality. at the end of the day, either one of these watches will take you as deep as the human body can go, while, you know, maybe on a submersible, this would be able to go deeper. While here, again, this is more of a watch for a person and a diver. So I don't know, there's something a bit romantic about that. And then in terms of retro vibes, you get a little bit more distilled retro vibe. And then this is a special material, right? Being titanium, but hey, so is Ever Brilliant steel, right? So is Sinn's Tegimented steel. So, and I do love titanium watches. I own quite a few as well. I should probably do a titanium watch. Actually, I have done one for field watches, but maybe for other watches, we'll do a dedicated segment later on. But I did want to kind of compare those because the Tudor, you know, the Pelagos anyway, the standard one, let alone the left-hand drive, just hasn't had the same luster that it's had in the past because there have been very minimal updates. People have just been excited about the FXD models, the 39. I do think that this is still a charming watch, especially as a lefty. Although I'm not a big fan of Destro crowns, I prefer to just have my crown where it normally is, which is on the opposite side, so then it doesn't dig into my hand or anything. So, because I am left-handed, technically I write with my left hand, so I wear my watches on my right wrist. But with all that, let's get into some more of what you're getting here. So Tudor, they've always been, since the very inception of Tudor, they've been a deal, right? They've been literally meant to be an alternative to Rolex, right? To a well-known, well-valued watch. So that's always been their mission statement, and they deliver on that, right? So sometimes I feel like it's a little unfair to compare other brands to Tudor because Tudor's whole mission statement has always been to undercut the competition, to be an affordable alternative to something great, but great in its own right, of course, right? So speaking of great, let's check out this bezel action. Very nice. 60 click, unidirectional, rotating with that matte ceramic insert, fully loomed. This is a beautiful bezel action. So well engineered, especially considering how thin the bezel is, which makes you think, man, they could have just thinned out the case. Could you thin out the case? All of the engineering that you've put into this watch to have such a cool clasp and everything, like, could we have the case thinner and still be 500 meters of water resistance? Could we do 300 meters? I was so disappointed that the 39 millimeter Pelagos only had 200 meters of water resistance, which is the equivalent to the Black Bay, right? And it's just like, I just felt like that was such a missed opportunity to be at 300 and really just kind of keep a space between the two in terms of just more of a professional spec. So that was a bit of a bummer. Especially considering, yeah, this is a pretty hefty piece, especially in the year 2023, to only have 500 meters of water resistance. It's more than you're ever going to need, absolutely. But it just tells me that you could, you know, due to the tolerances and the engineering, you could absolutely make something quite a bit thinner. Again, quite a bit thinner with the same level of, you know, effort or more effort, because the technology's out there. You can absolutely make something that is going to be just as water resistant, that is going to be just as thin. So I do wish as much effort as they put into this amazing clasp, which, hey, let's get to it, guys. So very cool. So you have 3 micro adjust spots here, 1, and then you can kind of just, if I can do it behind the camera. Okay, maybe I'm not gonna, oh, okay, you got to pull out, then you put it down, and then it secures. So you pull out, slide it down, then it secures, right? So there's those spots, which you can ratchet in, which is nice. So that's in, and then you pull out to get that. You see it's spring loaded. So when you get it out of those divots, and then the cool thing is if you take it out of there and you just let it rest here, then you go into the spring loaded functionality where essentially you can wear this in the water or wherever where your wrist might expand because of the heat, and all of a sudden now you have tons of that. Is just such a beautiful, like, I love that technology. I'm surprised more brands aren't trying to duplicate that, because I think it's so cool. And then you still do have, if I hit push here, a dedicated diver's extension, guys. So if you need to put it over a wetsuit, it's not like you have to use this and stretch it over the wetsuit. You can absolutely just do that. You can set it. You can get, you know, a very, very nice fitment setup. So I do think that that is a really beautiful feature of this piece. Is just amazingly designed. Clasp. It's not super overbuilt or anything like that. You know, if you look at the folding mechanism, it's not like it's any more. It's actually slightly less milled than you'll find in a lot of other modern variations. Nobody ever complains about that, though. Everything fits beautifully. You see even the use of a ceramic ball for the detent there on the fold over clasp, which is beautiful. Tactile engagement. This is fantastic from every aspect, right? Whether you're turning the bezel, whether you're fidgeting or adjusting your clasp, or even winding the crown. Of course, it'd be nice if you're winding the crown on the traditional side, but the knurling here is really, really nice. And I have to say, the movement, not too shabby on that winding action. So very nice, very smooth. And you guys can see that it does have a really beautiful finish to it. Even though it is mostly brushed, you can see that it does have still nice chamfers that are really sharply done. Of course, again, this is a worn piece, and I think that's one of the cool things. Yeah, you save some money, but also you can buy a piece that looks like a tool watch that can be worn like a tool watch. So with that said, let's actually get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this wears really quite well. Of course, if I do get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, you're gonna see a bit of perspective distortion. So what I like to do is keep my wrist nice and low, and then just work to tighten up the shot so you guys can have still a detailed look, while just maybe taking in a bit of a truer aspect ratio. Check out how more centered that looks on my wrist. And I say from the top view, really aesthetically pleasing. Of course, now if I get to the side profile, doesn't pull out the same tricks that you might get, whether they be keeping it physically thin, like you would see from the Sinn, or keeping it more visually thin, like you would see on the Seiko. But I'll say at the end of the day, the 14.4 millimeter thickness isn't bad. It's also, you know, obviously it's not doing itself any favors by having these thicker slab sides, but at the end of the day, it's not overly thick, right? It's just feels like a full-sized diver. Now, this isn't some diver that I feel like is oh so versatile and I can wear this in various situations and dress it up and dress it down. No, this is definitely a dressed down, professional, serious person's watch. This is not a fun, necessarily, you know, very colorful, vintage-inspired piece. It's also not a dress diver that's just going to look great underneath the cuff of a suit or something like that. I think it will look okay, depending on the tailoring of the shirt cuff and all that. But I think at the end of the day, this looks best very casual and, you know, very functional, and just focusing on those themes that it just executes very well. So with that said, let's actually get it off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Yes, as you can see, this is a Lume Beast. This is a technical, professional diver's piece of kit, and it renders as such. Even after minimal charging here, this is not like I had this outdoors for 10 minutes of direct sunlight. This was, hey, underneath the studio lights, and then maybe a quick little flash of the flashlight. And you can see this just really delivers. And this is one of the best features about this watch. It is just, in terms of the Lume, it is executed just to an absolute expert level. But one thing I always like to work in, of course, is a bit of a, you know, low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And you guys can see, my gosh, this thing is gorgeous. And look, the Lume is just, extremely potent. Even when you have a bit of lighting as well, it still wants to give you that clear crispness, and maybe enough to kind of backlight the little photina, that little tinge of aging that they do add to the daylight lume, which is something I kind of forgot to mention to you guys. So that's a polarizing feature about this. But hey, they did get the red line of text, which does tie into kind of that historical look. Also, you're getting that roulette day wheel from that automatic manufacturer movement caliber MT 5612 LHD, which is a COSC certified chronometer with a 4 hertz beat, which is going to be 8 ticks per second for a 70-hour power reserve. So it is again, it's a spec monster, but that's kind of the whole point of Tudor watches since the very inception. That bracelet, fully articulated, tapering down to about 17.9 millimeters, screw pin connectors, milled clasp with that spring-loaded toolless micro adjust. It's a lot. It offers a whole lot. That 3D sloped chaptering, the 3D nature of the dial. It's very, very captivating, and I do like it a lot. And I would technically be saving money if I had just one Pelagos versus having the Sinn and the Seiko. But for me, is just being a big collector, not less is always more. In a lot of ways it is, but in this case, it's kind of fun having more specialized variations versus just something that feels like a little bit more of a do-it-all that covers a lot of bases. I think it's kind of fun to experience those more niche products, especially as a collector, especially when thinking about how each piece holds its place within a collection. But at the same time, this Tudor could easily be next to an Omega Speedmaster and an Aquaterra, or a Rolex Explorer, and it could create an easy 2, 3, 5 watch collection because of how much ground and territory this model covers in terms of being a deep diver, in terms of being very highly and technically proficient with what it delivers, and being quite modern, also with that hint of retro aesthetic. So I think there's a lot there that's great, and I would love to own a 39 millimeter Pelagos in the future. We'll see if they come out with one that is really within my sweet spot. Their 39 right now is pretty close. I think there are some things that I wish were a little bit more like this traditional Pelagos, or even like the FXD, in terms of some of those styling cues that just feel a little bit more purposefully unique. Versus, I feel like being watered down a bit, unfortunately, with the 39 millimeter model, because they really wanted it to have more broad appeal and more mass appeal. For me, that was a bit of a negative. So, guys, closing thoughts on the wrist. This wears large, but not oversized. It's definitely very manageable, at least on my 7.5-inch wrists, regardless of those thicker slab sides. This, it could feel a bit more balanced if they did have a thinner case. I think that's really the only dimension that you really have to play with. I really don't believe that you need to shrink this down very much. Of course, 39 millimeters sounds better, but it's really the thinness that would sell me more, or if they added some more complex case contouring that would just maybe thin out the mid case visually, so you would have something that just felt a little bit more refined. Now, in terms of model variants, this is also available in a standard right hand drive layout, in either black or blue, of course, with the same manufacturer movement. And in addition to, of course, they do have some 200-meter water resistant variations, whether it be the FXD or the 39 millimeter kind of everyday, more versatile piece. So for me, guys, some comparable models. Of course, this is kind of like, you could think of it as Tudor's Sea Dweller, right? Being that, high-tech deep diver. And this, of course, does compare very well to something like the Omega Planet Ocean line or Seiko's Tuna line, in terms of just being, again, that deeper diver, more high in tech. And of course, the visual aesthetic is more about, you know, the functional goodness that's there from the get-go. So for me, guys, bottom line, this is an unapologetic tool diver that very clearly puts function over form in a package that feels thoroughly modern. This is not something that you could mistake. Again, although it does have that vintage charm in terms of the snowflake dial and handset, which does conjure up some of those romantic memories, you know, from the Marine Nationale issued models of Tudors of yesteryear. I will say that this modern iteration, it is absolutely that. It is a modern iteration. It is beautifully done. It is wonderfully complex in terms of the things that I can enjoy on the dial, on that bracelet, you know, in terms of the clasp and everything like that. I just wish they would have been a little bit more wonderfully complex and, you know, technologically passionate when it came to crafting a case or a mid case that would be slightly thinner, or at least wear slightly thinner. So with that said, let me know what you all think in the comments below. If you like the video, please like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.